Welcome back. So guys, in this session we are now going to learn about classes. Before ES6, JavaScript did not have a formal class syntax. Instead, developers used constructor functions and prototypes to achieve similar functionality. Let's look into the demo to understand how it was done earlier. So I'm going to create a folder called 07 classes demo. And within that I will create a file 01 pre-ES6 constructor.js file. Now let's write code. In this code, I am going to define a constructor function person in JavaScript, which is a common way to create objects before the introduction of ES6 classes. The person function takes two parameters, name and age, and assigns them to the properties this.name and this.age of the newly created object. This allows each instance of person to have its own name and age properties. Next, a method greet is added to the person prototype. The prototype is an object that is shared among all instances of person, meaning that all instances can access the greet method. The greet method logs a greeting message to the console, which includes the name and age properties of the instance that calls it. This is achieved using string concatenation to construct the message. Finally, an instance of person is created using the new keyword, which calls the person constructor function and creates a new object with the specified name, Alice, and age, 30. Now let's run the code. The greet method is then called on this instance, person1, resulting in the output, hello, my name is Alice and I am 30 years old. This demonstrates how the constructor function and prototype method work together to create and interact with objects in pre-ES6 JavaScript. Next, look into how inheritance was achieved using the prototype chain. So to do that, I will create another file called 02 pre-ES6 inheritance. Let's write the code now. In this code, I am going to demonstrate how inheritance is implemented in pre-ES6 JavaScript using constructor functions and prototypes. It defines two constructor functions, animal and dog, and sets up inheritance so that dog inherits from animal. The animal constructor function takes a single parameter, name, and assigns it to the name property of the newly created object. The animal prototype is then extended with a method speak, which logs a message to the console indicating that the animal makes a noise. This method uses the name property of the instance that calls it. The dog constructor function also takes a name parameter. Inside the dog constructor, the animal constructor is called using animal.call, this, name. This ensures that the name property is properly initialized for dog instances by invoking the animal constructor in the context of the new dog instance. To set up inheritance, the dog prototype is assigned to an object created with animal.prototype using object.create animal.prototype. This creates a new object that inherits from animal.prototype and assigns it to dog.prototype. The dog.prototype.constructor is then explicitly set to dog to ensure that the constructor property correctly references the dog function. The dog prototype is further extended with its own speak method, which overrides the speak method inherited from animal. This new speak method logs a message to the console indicating that the dog barks, using the name property of the instance that calls it. Finally, an instance of dog is created with the name Rex using the new keyword. The speak method is called on this instance, resulting in the output, Rex barks. This demonstrates how the inheritance setup allows dog instances to use both the inherited properties and methods from animal and their own overridden methods. Now let's look into the example how we can achieve all these easily using ES6 classes. So for that I am going to create a file called 03es6classes.js. Now let's write the code. Here now I am going write code to define a class person using the ES6 class syntax, which is a more modern and concise way to create objects and handle inheritance in JavaScript compared to the pre-ES6 constructor functions and prototypes. The person class has a constructor method that takes two parameters, name and age. Inside the constructor, these parameters are assigned to the properties this.name and this.age of the newly created instance. This allows each instance of the person class to have its own name and age properties. The person class also includes a method greet, which is defined using the shorthand method syntax. The greet method logs a greeting message to the console, which includes the name and age properties of the instance that calls it. This is achieved using template literals, enclosed in backticks, to embed the name and age values directly within the string. An instance of the person class is created using the new keyword with the name Alice and age 30 passed as arguments to the constructor. This instance is assigned to the constant variable person1. The greet method is then called on this instance, resulting in the output, "Hello, my name is Alice and I am 30 years old." This demonstrates how the ES6 class syntax simplifies the creation and usage of objects in JavaScript. Now let's look into the inheritance demo, how it is being created with ES6 syntax. So for that I am going to create a file called 04es6inheritance.js. Now let's write the code. Here I am going to write code that defines a class dog that extends another class animal using the ES6 class syntax. This demonstrates how inheritance is implemented in modern JavaScript. The dog class uses the extends keyword to indicate that it is a subclass of animal. This means that dog inherits all the properties and methods of the animal class. Any instance of dog will have access to the functionality defined in animal unless it is overridden in the dog class. Within the dog class, a method speak is defined. This method overrides any speak method that might be defined in the animal class. The speak method logs a message to the console, indicating that the dog barks. It uses a template literal to include the name property of the instance that calls the method. The template literal is enclosed in backticks and allows for the embedding of expressions within the string using $syntax. By defining the speak method in the dog class, the code ensures that when the speak method is called on a dog instance, it will log a message specific to dogs, barks, rather than any generic message that might be defined in the animal class. This demonstrates how method overriding works in ES6 classes, allowing subclasses to provide specific implementations of methods inherited from their parent classes. Now we will learn about static and instance methods in ES6. So to understand, let's create a file called 05 static and instance method demo.js. Let's write code now. Now I am going to write code that will demonstrate the use of static and instance methods in ES6 classes. It defines two classes, Mathutal and Car, each showcasing different types of methods. The Mathutal class includes a static method add. Static methods are defined using the static keyword and are called on the class itself, not on instances of the class. The add method takes two parameters, a and b, and returns their sum. This method can be called directly on the Mathutal class without creating an instance of the class. The code demonstrates this by calling mathutal.add 5, 3, and logging the result to the console, which outputs 8. The car class, on the other hand, includes an instance method drive. Instance methods are defined without the static keyword and are called on instances of the class. The car class has a constructor that takes a brand parameter and assigns it to the brand property of the instance. The drive method logs a message to the console indicating that the car is driving, using a template literal to include the brand property of the instance. An instance of the car class is created with the brand Toyota and assigned to the constant variable car. The drive method is then called on this instance, resulting in the output, Toyota is driving. This code illustrates the difference between static methods, which are called on the class itself, and instance methods, which are called on instances of the class. Static methods are useful for utility functions that do not depend on instance-specific data, while instance methods operate on data specific to an instance of the class. So guys, we are done with the session. In the next session, we will discuss asynchronous scripts. On this note, I am stopping over here. See you in the next session.